And sometimes you do books, and you have some guy writing a book, and you maybe don't read it as carefully. You have ghostwriters too; they help you, and they in this case didn't help too much.
Donald Trump is defending Kristi Noem's dog killing during what was meant to be a softball interview with Clay and Buck, gone completely and totally haywire. So let me reset the stage here for you. Donald Trump had a presumed short list of VP contenders that included South Dakota Governor Republican Kristi Noem. A few weeks ago, Kristi Noem's book excerpt leaked, or an excerpt as she referred to it, in which she proudly, defiantly bragged about killing a 14-month-old dog when she was younger. And people on left and right were horrified by this, and horrified also by the poor judgment where sometimes you've got to put a dog down on a farm. Okay. But the idea that it makes you look like a trustworthy and powerful leader is pretty poor judgment. By all accounts, Kristi Noem is no longer a front runner to be Donald Trump's vice presidential running mate. We didn't know what Trump's feeling was about the Kristi Noem story. He was finally asked about it yesterday on the Clay and Buck show. And here's what he had to say.
I'm sure you've seen some of the Kristi Noem stories. She might be the only person getting worse press than you on the left right now with the dog shooting story and then the Kim Jong-un story. You met Kim Jong-un. I'm curious what that relationship is like now. Does any of that story, is she still in the mix as a VP? Have you thought maybe she'd make more sense in a cabinet? How do you analyze?
Or maybe nowhere near federal government at all?
Stories like that as you go about making a choice.
Well, until this week, she was doing incredibly well, and she got hit hard. And sometimes you do books, and you have some guy writing a book, and you maybe don't read it as carefully. You have ghostwriters too; they help you, and they in this case didn't help too much. Now she's terrific. Look, she's been a supporter of mine from day one. She did a great job as governor. And, you look at South Dakota numbers, she's really done a great job. And in some form, I mean, I think she's terrific. A couple of rough stories, there's no question about it. And when explained, the dog story, people hear that, and people from different parts of the country probably feel a little bit differently. But that's a tough story.
It was a tough story. So, as usual, Trump unable or unwilling to answer simple questions. Are you still considering her for VP or aren't you? And it sort of sounds, if we run Trump's speech through some kind of Trumpian synthesizer that can detect his mannerisms of speech and kind of determine what it is he's saying, I think what Trump is saying here is he still likes her. He recognizes the press around the dog killing and lying about meeting Kim Jong-un haven't been good. He'd still consider her for some kind of role in a potential Trump administration, but that she's no longer in the running for VP. And again, we're decoding the rantings of a madman who's unwilling to answer any question directly. But that's the impression I'm getting from Trump's answer. Tell me if you agree. Trump also weighed in on the supposed epidemic of undocumented immigrants voting in presidential elections, something they legally cannot do, and there is no evidence whatsoever that they are doing. And Trump saying people who don't even know what the country is are voting in presidential elections.
There's no question about it. And then the other is having to register voters, because they're taking these people who can't speak English, who don't even know what this country is, and they're registering them and trying to get them out to vote. And I only implore the Republicans to be tough, because they don't play as tough a game, unfortunately.
Now, there is no evidence that this is happening. They come up with these stories that sometimes have like a visceral visual element, whereas Trump tells it, you imagine Democrats with clipboards just running around like ants, registering undocumented immigrants to vote. And of course, none of it makes sense. You can't register to vote. You can't get on the voter rolls if you are not a citizen of the United States. Where would Democrats even be going in order to register the undocumented immigrants? What's the mechanism through which they are doing it? It just, no aspect of this makes sense. But most importantly, it's been studied. We've spoken to some of the folks that investigated whether this is taking place. And there is absolutely no epidemic of undocumented immigrants registering to vote, which they can't do, or voting. And the idea that the other version of this is, okay, the undocumented immigrants aren't registering, but what they do is if you're an undocumented immigrant, you'll show up to a polling place and go, oh, I'm Frederick Smith III from 15 Penny Lane. I'm here to vote. And then the person at the polling place goes, oh, yes, of course, Mr. Smith, here's your ballot. Even if that were happening, which there is no evidence is happening, it would be an extraordinarily stupid and long-winded way to try to steal an election. And it's also not happening based on any evidence we have. So just, again, more of this nonsense. And then lastly, Trump mixing metaphors in a way only he can do. Listen to this.
But you don't think he's able?
I think at some point he goes out. I think so. What do I know? I can only say that here he is, and he was never the sharpest bulb in the room, ever. And now
There you go. Biden was never the sharpest bulb in the room. He was never the sharpest knife. He was never the brightest bulb, and he was certainly never the sharpest bulb in the room. Well, if that's the case, Trump should be able to do really well in the 2 debates he's agreed to. We will, of course, cover those live when we have specifics about them. Let's hear from a sponsor or two, and then we'll be right back with Michael Cohen's testimony yesterday. Magic Spoon has been sponsoring the David Pakman Show for years now because my audience just can't get enough, and here's why. Magic Spoon has reinvented our favorite childhood cereals to taste great, but with 0 grams of sugar, 14 grams of protein, and only 4 net carbs. It's a high-protein, keto-friendly way to relive those Saturday mornings with your favorite cartoons, but with only 140 calories a serving and without all the sugar. My favorite flavor is maple waffle. I grew up in New England, okay, but it also comes in familiar flavors like cocoa, fruity, frosted. You can also check out Magic Spoon treats, which are sort of like the marshmallow treats you had as a kid, but only 1 gram of sugar, 1 to 2 net carbs, and packed with 12 grams of protein. Magic Spoon treats are the perfect on-the-go snack. They come in 4 great flavors: marshmallow, chocolatey peanut butter, blueberry muffin, and double chocolate. Go to magicspoon.com/Pakman to try Magic Spoon cereal and treats for yourself. Get $5 off with the code Pakman. The link is down below.